political engagement. What we're talking about here is getting people informed and engaged, participating in government and elections. So when we look at political engagement by ages 18 to 24, 25 to 34, all the way up to seniors, the first question is, how certain are you to vote? Certainty to vote, 39%. Interest in politics, 43%, which is kind of strange that people are interested in not going to vote. 33% say they have at least a fair amount about politics. There's knowledge about politics. So when you look at how that compares, more people are going to vote as they get older, 50%, 60%, 68%, 85%. And then it drops down a little for 75 and older. But when you look at these numbers, you see that hopefully those are higher. Hopefully the people who are engaged and know a lot about politics is higher. And one of the things we want to talk about is why. Why is it low? Information is key. If you're engaged and you're informed, you're more likely to vote. And newspaper readership, percent of individuals reading paper on the prior day, it's obviously much higher by age. That habit has been established. Newspapers are obviously not the only media available. So when we ask how closely do youth follow political news, about half are following somewhat closely or very closely. That can be a variety of different sources. It's, the internet has a bunch of sources. The internet's a little hit or miss. If you're not reading a daily newspaper, you're watching TV on a regular basis. Not that TV is a great source, but that kind of information where you're getting consistent information rather than just haphazards when somebody, is irritated or something goes terribly wrong. So this number is troubling, the not very closely or not at all closely, for youth following information. And that has consequences. The rich are much more likely to vote than those making less than $15,000 a year, and a lot of young people are in that group of less than $15,000 a year. So only 41% of eligible voters voted when they were making that little. And when you're making over $150,000 a year, you're much more likely. Now, we've talked about some of the other factors. The older you are, the more likely you are to vote. The richer you are, the more educated you are, the more settled you are if you're a homeowner. Those things all are factors as well. Just to compare a couple of elections, if you look at the blue line, that's a presidential election, and then the gray line for 2014 is a midterm election. And we're not in any way surprised that the number of people who voted in midterm elections is smaller. But what we see is, huge voter turnout for incomes of over $150,000 or more, and very small, particularly in the midterm when it's, 25%, for those making under 10,000. So there are factors that kind of tell us who votes and who doesn't. This is sort of interesting when you compare voters to non-voters by age. There's a lot of non-voters in the young group, a lot of non-voters by ethnicity. This sort of shows you that, when we're looking at California and it says the electorate is white, well, it's because the electorate is old and old people are white. High school or less, there's a large number, some college. You can see that voters are more likely to be better educated. That just gives you a little perspective on that. In the last election, partially because so many people didn't like either choice, a lot of people didn't vote in the 2016 presidential election, but voter turnout was, 53, 54%. And most people didn't vote. More people didn't vote than voted for either candidate. And so that really shows you the power that non-voters have if only they would exercise it. This section is sort of interesting to show you how not registered voters have very different answers to what they want from government. So when you ask registered voters, the blue, do you support the government providing free college? Almost none of them, registered voters. But if you ask people who aren't registered to vote, which are probably younger people, which are probably poorer people, which are all of those things in non-voters are doubly true in non-registered. And you see a very large number, not a majority, but a very large number who support that. Support for financial transaction tax. So when you sell or buy stocks, you would pay a tax on that, and it would fund a tax cut for the middle class. More non-registered people support that. Government aid to the poor is good. Registered voters, a very small number. Non-registered, a much higher. Support for a higher minimum wage, much higher. So you start to see that public policy preferences are different among the groups who vote or don't vote, among the groups who show up to vote and those who don't, for those who are registered or not. Same kind of questions. This is for non-voters based on income. So this is the poor earning less than $30,000 who don't vote, what they think about government increasing services, what they think about increasing spending on the poor, what they think about guaranteed jobs and a standard of living, where rich voters absolutely oppose that. So there's a power that non-voters have that they are not exercising. This compares those same questions based on young non-voters. So this is by age rather than income. And you see that young people have different preferences than older voters. The 2012 election was startling when you looked at the eligible Latino voters who voted and those who didn't. A million more Latino voters stayed home than actually voted. And it was a record number. 11.2 million eligible Latino voters turned out to vote, but even more didn't. And, you sort of see some version of this a lot, of people getting really upset about elections, and they didn't vote. They didn't participate. So one of the questions we have is, how do we fix this? How do we engage voters? How do we get people to be engaged? First of all, we've got to acknowledge that it's broken. And there are a number of things that we could fix within the system. We vote too often. We have a hyper-democracy. We vote all the time. We vote for primary elections. We vote for general elections. We vote in off-year elections. We vote for too many offices. We vote for the plural executive. We vote for the county's plural executive. We vote for city offices. It's just too much. If you take comparative governments, you learn that in other countries, they vote once every 5 years for maybe 5 or 6 people. They vote for party rather than candidate. It's a whole different world. But since we're not going to fix that, we're going to work within the system. Let's think about how we can fix that. First, voter efficacy. That's a big word and a big term for something that just means people who believe their vote matters are more likely to vote. That's simple. Now, when our civics classes, when our media focuses on the national elections, it's tough to believe in voter efficacy. When there's an electoral college, when California is a blue state and your vote really doesn't matter as a Republican because there are millions more Democrats, that's tough to sell to an individual voter. Your vote matters for president. Well, not really, because of the system of elections that we use. But if we instead taught civics with a local focus, focusing on local elections, city councils and school boards and assembly and state senators, people who are likely to appear in front of us, have candidate forums and encourage our students to go, have our students plan the candidate forums, that all of a sudden brings, first of all, politics home. And second of all, your vote matters in local elections. They're often really close elections, and the consequences of those elections are big. What the schools are going to look like in your community, what your city is going to look like in your community, whether or not you have good roads or bad roads, those kinds of decisions are going to be made, whether or not the water is drinkable. And you can ask those candidates questions and tough questions and have them answer. And third, we need to teach people how to vote. Now, I don't mean how to vote Democrat or vote Republican. I don't even mean how to vote like, here's how you punch the card. I mean, we have up to, 30 or 40 candidates on a ballot. We've got, 10 to 20 ballot initiatives. We need to teach people how to vote. So first, when we look at close elections, local elections are close. In Anaheim, they had an election that in one night of the counting, it was tied. And, we were all fervently looking up what happens if there's a tie in Anaheim. And do you, flip a coin? Well, there's a recount and eventually you flip a coin. Measure J for North Orange County Community College. We asked the voters, and it takes 55% to pass a bond measure for a school district. We won by 15 votes. Jose Moreno ended up winning that by a couple hundred votes. But it's just, your vote really matters in these local elections. And the difference between Jose Moreno and Jordan Brandman was huge in Anaheim. Really deciding the future of Anaheim. Measure J was a question of whether or not the North Orange County Community College District, Fullerton College, as one of them, got $500 million for construction money. That's a big consequence. And your vote really does matter. Candidate forums where you can ask questions, where you can see the answers, and there's a lot revealed in those candidate forums, and I really encourage you to go. How to vote. First of all, vote for what you know. And I don't think we give students, young people, that permission, that you don't have to vote for everything. Then we need to tell them about informed shortcuts. Vote for the party that you agree with more often. Leave it blank if you don't know anything about the office. Because I really think it's crucial that we educate people that you don't have to know everything the first time you vote. And I think that people come to vote and they don't know a lot of those offices and they feel fraudulent and they don't vote again. There's a big push to actually engage voters and make voting a lifelong habit. The earlier you vote, the more likely you are to vote for the rest of your life. So there's a lot to this, though. You got to provide high quality civic education for everybody, not just, people whose parents are going to vote. We've got to have informed people. We've got to inform people about the world around them. And then lower the voting age for high school students where that civic education, and only where that civic education, is concentrated on local politics. Now, there are a number of states where the states are allowed to lower, and not for president, not for Senate, not for any of those other offices, but just for city council and school board. So the idea is, and Tacoma Park, Maryland is a really great example. So they focused all of their high school civics classes on local issues. They talked about the national government and the state government too, but a huge part of it was about they did a report on their school district, kind of an exit interview about what was good and what was bad. They presented it in front of the city councils and the school boards. They did candidate forums, all of those sorts of things. And then they lowered the voting age for just those two elections, for city council and school board, to 16. And look at the difference in the turnout. This is a non-election year. Not even general election, not even midterm election. This is non-election year. 11% turnout overall, 21% turnout overall, and yet the young people who were engaged and knew the candidates had higher voter turnout than California had for its midterm election. Huge higher turnout for that. And so one of the questions is, if you really engage young people where they are knowledgeable, where they're informed, they will come out to vote at very high turnout. Now, these kids, when they're 18, are still going to vote for city council, and they're still going to vote for school board. And now we add president to it. And maybe they know about their United States Senate race. Maybe they know about